I thought this one was also worth a quick record. Still got snow on the top, you see. It's probably the last Alp as you come round from Italy to France. Obviously it's on the French side. But in order to attack the Roman Empire, well, I keep on going on about Hannibal. I think I've gone on about Hannibal lots of times, but he had to land on the far side of the Alps and pick his way with his elephants. And I've gone on about elephants more times than enough, I suppose. People are going to get bored of the same themes, but I just talk about what's important, and elephants are more important than people realise, in fact. But it's interesting. I will talk about Napoleon though, because you can see Napoleon down there, can't you? Those who know what I'm talking about, they'll already get it. But let me just focus up. France. You can see how tiny and small the fields are in comparison to most other countries. And this is the effect of Napoleonic law. Because prior to Napoleon, in the old not feudal, it wasn't feudal, although to a degree it was feudal still. It was certainly sort of like empire based and to a degree feudal, coming into the time of the French Revolution. In that old situation, you used to have one person used to inherit a farm from his parents, and then you have all the European fairy tales about the second and third boys going off to seek their fourth or fifth, and the typical number of children for a woman who is not practicing birth control is about 8. So if half of them are sons, and you have about 4 boys, and so boy number 1 would inherit the lot, winner takes it all, and you'd have boys number 2, 3 and 4 going off to seek their fortunes, more often than not end up in some army or other and take part in one of the many wars, and usually they'd end up dead, but sometimes they'd end up making enough war booty to start farms and things of their own, but they wouldn't be able to inherit it. It would only be the first one who would tend to inherit. Seems rather cruel, doesn't it? Because we used to giving children a fair share, but that's not the way they used to think. Since, nevertheless, Napoleon thought it was frightfully unfair. No doubt a lot of other people did if they weren't the first sons. But basically, these tiny shareholdings are due to the fact that Napoleon, basically, when he took control of everything, said, right, we're not going to do it that way anymore. All right. Any objections? No. We're going to have a look at the completely dried out river. Shows we're in southern Europe, doesn't it? There's the Mediterranean just coming up round there, the curve of it. Anyway, you can just see the way the clouds are curving off, and the blue, the telltale blue of a sea camel. And jolly old Napoleon, he says, no, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to have equal. We're going to have. I mean, he still didn't regard women as equals to men, but that wasn't for another 100 years after Napoleon. But as far as égalité, fraternité is concerned, and liberté is concerned, you know, he was all for fraternity, the brothers, and them being equal, the men amongst themselves. And so, you know, you had he scrapped a lot of things. Obviously, he scrapped to a degree, scrapped the monarchy, although it came back again for a while afterwards. But without things like droit de seigneur, which is basically if you got married, your feudal lord had the right to the first night with your spouse. So, as therefore, if people did what they were supposed to in those days, there wouldn't have been any sex until that time. it means that effectively in those regions where droit de seigneur was practiced, the firstborn in almost every family, the person actually doing that inheriting, had a good chance of being genetically related to the person that was in charge of the whole thing anyway. So everybody else was just around for the benefit of these small elite families. We're going to get back to that situation soon anyway, but that's how it was. Napoleon, he said, well, this isn't on, is it? So he made it so that the farms had to be divided equally between the sons, and obviously you keep doing that for several generations, and you're going to come up with impossibly small farms that can't actually that aren't economically viable anymore. But then of course the invisible hand steps in, and one brother buys another's small holding. One brother decides, oh, I'm going to go off and be an industrialist anyway, you take my half and just pay me a rent. So they didn't start to become infinitesimally small. Imagine that everybody had taken Napoleon literally. I mean, the farms by today would be, of course, tiny. They'd be like postage stamps, and people, they'd be lucky if they could grow an elderberry on it. Your mother, she smells of elderberries. But basically, that's how it was. Here we're coming to the sea nicely now. Similarly, people didn't take the Buddha really literally. Only Buddhist monks take this aestheticism kick literally. Buddha said refrain from sex. It's good if you can refrain from sex, as indeed do Roman Catholics. So they also go with that pagan notion, which wasn't in the Bible. In the Bible it was described as a doctrine of demons, but the Roman Catholic Church says if you work for us, you got to do it. No, no mucking about. It's not just like in the Bible. It says it's a gift for some people so that they can more easily get into dangerous ministries, not having to worry about their families. It's actually something everybody has to do, even though they don't have dangerous lives. This basically saves money for the church. Very wicked, very demonic, and absolutely against what God said to people, that they should go forth and multiply and replenish the earth. So, wow, look at all that red stuff on the beach down there. It's interesting, isn't it? I don't cause pain to Catholics. I think they're brothers and sisters of mine. Just they've got some ideas which I like to challenge. If you want to take me up on it, go ahead. If not, please don't be offended. I know, you're very loyal to your church, and that's good, but I just wish that there'd be some people in church which would review some of these doctrines in the light of Scripture. That's what we had a Reformation for. It wasn't very nice at the time. Now we hopefully love one another and speak respectfully to one another. The theological differences remain. We don't kill each other now because the political aspects are not there, and long may that continue. It's interesting, isn't it? It almost looks like the patches of dark on the sea are obviously the shadows of the clouds, where they look like little reefs or things, but they're not. But let me just say that if you took Buddha literally, if Buddhists took Buddha literally, then the Buddhist parts of Asia wouldn't exactly be the most populous places in the world now, would they? Because it doesn't take long from when people decide that they're not going to have any sex anymore. It doesn't take long from that for the human race to actually disappear from those areas. So that's the fact that there's a religion there that says be aesthetic, don't have sex, don't reproduce, which of course is exactly what the devil wants. Doesn't want human beings around. That's the creation of God. He doesn't want them. He wants his bunch numerically in charge. They can't reproduce. He doesn't want them getting outnumbered by us. So he wants human beings to stop reproducing. God wants us reproducing, and He wants us to have faith and to love Jesus Christ the Saviour as well as the Creator of the world. And And if you follow Buddha, as a servant of the devil, if ever there was one, sitting there under his tree covered in snails, basically, if you follow him literally, then you should be not having sex. And yet, in the places that call themselves Buddhist countries, there's more people than anywhere else on the planet. Where they came from, given that they're not allowed to have sex, anybody's guess. If you want to guess at where they came from, by all means do so in the comments below. I should say that it was basically a case of double standards, or rather a case of, if you tell people not to do something, they're going to want to do it all the more. It's only in Christian nations where you actually get told, go forth and multiply, have big families, do it, that they don't. And then you say, wait a minute, what about Islam? They're told to have big families, how is it that they actually do it? Well, they're just too scared, aren't they, to do otherwise. After all, it's not like they've got any kind of ability to negotiate with things. They just get on and be good Muslims. So, and not necessarily brilliant either. So, and of course the devil's perfectly happy for people that deny Jesus Christ the glory that he should have, to have larger families and be politically more, well, demographically more important. He's perfectly happy for that lot to thrive. So they don't get persuaded by his whisperings not to have smaller families. He knows he's going to use them all in some big war anyway, and use them all up that way, fighting Christians and Jews. So he's happy for them to get on and multiply. But anyway, that's the little potted dismissal of the majority of the religions of the world there, but never mind. Nobody want to discuss it, go into more detail about it, that's fine. Thankfully now we have much more commenting ability in the comments under YouTube. That's what I was waiting for, what I was asking them for, what I did ask them for when I took part in the survey that they did a couple of years ago. I don't suppose they listened to me alone, but maybe more people made the same comments. Google didn't start life as a discussion area. It started life obviously as a search engine, but it soon took over one of its early acquisitions was Deja News, which was the archive of all the news groups, what used to be called Usenet, Google took that over, and of course, as always, they did something with it. They merged it into something called Google Groups, which in a sense made it really theirs, but it also subverted it. Now, of course, if you want to look up anything that was written in those times by anybody, I was usually going under the name Uncle Davey in those groups. Basically, you have to go through Google to do it. You have to go through Google Groups practically to do it. So you have to have a Google account to do it. Just like in YouTube, if you want Google acquired YouTube, now you pretty much have to have a Google account to have a channel on YouTube. So some of us probably have a number of Google accounts. That's also not very convenient because then you're logging in, logging out, doing different things. But I think you probably do need to, if you have a sort of like professional side and a less professional side, you probably need to. There's a friend of mine who goes to Seventh-day Adventists, and he also goes to synagogue, and he's concerned, well, he's not so concerned about the Seventh-day Adventists taking issue with him being in the synagogue. He's more worried about synagogue taking issue with the fact he's really a Seventh-day Adventist. So he tries to do everything in two different ways, and but he's no good at it, so probably everybody knows what he's up to anyway. It's interesting clouds out there now, isn't it? Anyway, we're just going to be coming into Spain soon. Good job I'm going to the hotel first. I'll do the usual thing with the old hotel room review. I didn't get this time, for the first time ever, into the hotel where the conference is, because we booked late. It was only decided really relatively late that I'm going, because I seem to go to all of them. I think at first they thought it wasn't really my turn anymore, somebody else's turn, but then it's difficult really for some of my colleagues to get visas. But I made it so that it's really as cheap as possible for them to send me. Apart from anything else, one of the reasons I use my air miles, and I put that on the table, I suppose, as my bid to be a colleague going. And as long as I go, then I can film interesting stuff. But I tell you, these conferences are hard work. It's not just the jolly part is, I suppose, the filming for me, because I then can enjoy it even afterwards. I can enjoy it again when I'm putting the films together, and when I'm answering your comments and the films come up, then I don't get to answer every comment because I'm just sometimes too busy, but I do appreciate them, and I certainly read them all. Sometimes I get back to them, I read them again when I'm going back to the film to read other people's comments, and I look up and say, oh yes, there was that one again, and that one. So some of your comments I've read several times over and appreciated them every time, so please do keep on doing it. Yeah, looks like we're coming into the Spanish side. I better finish this tea because I want to take it away. I better stop recording anyway, but it's nice, isn't it, today? I feel quite happy for once. I wonder if I look happy. Let's check if I look happy. Do I look happy? Write in the comments below. Thank you.